trying not to only make the charcoal for biochar, but we're trying to utilize the heat that comes off the process of the fuel turning into charcoal. And what we're going to be utilizing is a technology, and you can Google this acronym up, it's TLUD. The common phrase for that is TLUD. What that stands for is top lit updraft. Because what we're trying to do is we're going to try to create a column of fuel, and we're going to light it from the top. That's the T and L, top lit. And when you start a fire on top of a column of fuel, it creates an updraft because the hot air starts rising and that pulls air in from below. That makes sense? So top lit updraft, that's called a TLUD. And I'm going to show you two different versions of TLUD. They're two scales. This is a particular model called the Champion. It's so called the Champion because at a biochar stove camp that happened, 6 years ago, Dr. Paul Anderson designed this, and it was the champion of that stove camp, and I think it's been the champion of every biochar stove camp since then. So this is the Champion design. You could go online, you could Google Champion gasifier, and there's all kinds of plans for how to make your own version of this. You could also purchase these, and I purchased this from an organization called the Biomass Energy Foundation. Unfortunately, the Biomass Energy Foundation no longer exists. It was run by Tom Reed. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with that name, but he was a torchbearer for the whole world of gasification for decades when most of us didn't care. He was holding the flame for gasification, but he's since resigned, and these are very hard to get now. If you want to get in touch with me and leave me your contact information, I'll see what I can do about getting you them. I'm going to send this one around and just send it around the audience, and people can take turns just looking at it. I'm going to try to point out all the details of it up here, but you'll get a more close look at it as it comes around. I think I'm going to choose not to send around the lid. That's not incredibly sharp, but better safe than sorry. So the Champion TLUD is just 2 cylinders. The inside cylinder's got a bottom. The inside cylinder, about an inch or so, few inches above the bottom, has a wire mesh screen. And your fuel goes and sits on top of that wire mesh screen. The entry to that inner cylinder is this primary hole right here. And notice something here. The hole going into this inner circle is much, much smaller than the hole going to the outer cylinder. That's very important. Because what's going to happen is we're going to fill this inner cylinder with fuel. And I'm using something that's all over America. Wood chips. And I just have an open mulch pile. I don't keep a cover over it. I don't have a roof over it. I wait for this kind of weather. Windy, not very humid, sunny. Wait for this weather to be around for like a week or two. That happens pretty regularly. And the day before it rains, before it gets humid, you just rake off the top 2 inches, put it into an open container, it could be a bucket, and stick that in some dry place, your attic. I stick it in the second floor of my barn, and just store it there, where it's not going to re-humidify. And that's plenty dry. So you fill the center cylinder up to the top with the wood chip. And like I said, it's called a top lit updraft. We're going to light it on the top, and that starts sucking in the primary air through that small hole. Now that hole is small for a reason. You don't want too much air going in there because you want just enough oxygen to create just enough combustion to start pyrolyzing that wood and turning it into wood gas. No solid, including wood, burns. That what burns are gases. Something that's been vaporized. So the next time you light a wood match, look closely and you'll see the wood is not on fire. There's gas coming off the wood matchstick that comes in contact with oxygen in the air, and that is what is on fire. And that gas starts coming off from the heat from the head being struck. And then the flame continues providing the heat to drive the wood gas off of that. And if you keep holding that wood match horizontally, what happens? It keeps flaming, the gas is driving out of the wood, and then eventually what you're left with in your hand? A horizontal, thin stick of charcoal. That's what we're doing here. You're letting in just enough primary air to create just enough combustion, to create just enough heat to pyrolyze the wood chip into wood gas. And that wood gas starts streaming up that central cylinder. And then what you're cooking your food on is we're going to light that wood gas, because that's not the only hole. There's this other big hole that's letting in air that comes up all the way around that central cylinder. And as that air comes up, it's got oxygen in it now. It comes in contact with that wood gas, and then you're cooking right underneath that lid. And see how that concentrator ring shoots that oxygen from all directions over the rising cylinder of wood gas. And so you have oxygen shooting in from all directions over that rising cylinder of wood gas, and you get very complete combustion. On a non-windy day like this, you have dry fuel, you barely will see a puff of smoke coming out of there. If you have a windy day, the windy day will create weird backdrafts, and you'll get a puff of smoke here and there. This thing runs for about 25 minutes, full bore, blasting heat out of it, directing it straight up. What's coming out of here burns so clean, there's no smoke or anything. This isn't like a smoking process where you're trying to smoke a meat or a cheese or a fish or that kind of thing. It tastes no different whether you cook it on any heating source. We're just creating a heat source to cook the food. It's just very hot. Yep. So a lot of you probably heard of rocket stoves. Have you, anybody here heard of rocket stoves? Two advantages to a rocket stove that this does not have. You can use pretty much anything as a fuel. Brush, twigs, something big, like even a pretty sizable log. You can kind of just, if the chute's big enough, you can drive it in there and burn just the tip of it. And you can also control the flame a little bit, and you can shut it off whenever you want. How that relates to this is when you light this baby, game on. You got heat blaring out of here for pretty much the next 25 to 30 minutes, and you can control it a little bit by putting kind of dampers over that primary inlet hole, but don't count on that working incredibly well. It'd be best just for you to count on the fact that once you light this baby, game is on. And even if you're just going to fry an egg, it doesn't matter. When your egg is fried, you got heat barreling out of here for the next 20-something minutes. Everybody with me? So why would you use one of these over a rocket stove? Exactly. What are you left with when you burn wood in a rocket stove? Nothing. You're left with ash. You burn wood chip in a T-lud, and what are you left with? Super high quality charcoal. It's been burned at a very high temperature, about 500 degrees. People ask me, well, can you just use any kind of charcoal for biochar? Yeah, but all charcoal is not equal. Why do you want this charcoal? This charcoal is burned at a high enough temperature to drive all the volatiles out. Yeah, you could use that natural wood charcoal that you get in the bags from the grocery store that you're going to put in your barbecue grill, but it's not a great idea. They burn that at a lower temperature, and because it's burned at a lower temperature, it's got a lot more volatiles in it. That's great if you want to light it in your grill. Some of those volatiles will help you light it, right? It's good for them, and it's got more BTUs in it. That's not what you want for biochar. You want all the volatiles driven out of there. The main advantage that you're getting from biochar is incredible amount of microscopic pores. You've probably heard the thing, they say that a handful of charcoal has as much surface area as a couple football fields. How could that be? Well, just look at it. It's filled with microscopic pores. And it's the walls of all those pores that are chemically adsorptive. They are also absorptive of water, but what I'm saying is adsorptive. They're basically like glue, and they hold on to nutrient cations, all the nutrients that your plants love. So they hold on to water, they hold on to nutrients, and they have all kinds of nooks and crannies. It sounds like a deluxe hotel for beneficial microbes, and that's the benefit of biochar. Now this isn't biochar, this is just charcoal. How do we get this into biochar? That's the easiest way. Add it to compost. Compost has got nutrients in it, and you're also going to, the beneficial microbes from the compost are going to move on in and make home. That way, when you crush this up, you don't need to put even a big chunk like that in your garden. Just crush it up smaller. What looks like a very tiny piece to you is going to look like a boulder to a microbe. And once again, the whole purpose of this is the unseen microbes underneath our feet. We're trying to help them because healthy microbes in the soil mean healthy plants in your garden. What's another way to get nutrients in here? I probably shouldn't say this on the record, but I'm going to say it anyways. Pee on it. The nitrogen is going right into the charcoal and sticking to the walls of the pores. And then add it to your compost, get the beneficial microbes to move in, and you're ready to put it in your garden. She asked, how do you crush it? There's a number of ways. You could just put it in a bucket with a 2x4, the low-tech way. You could get one of those tampers for tamping soil that's like an 8-inch square metal thing with a handle, and put it in a bigger tub and tamp it. You could put it in a plastic woven feed bag. Don't overfill it, like a third full, and seal up the lip and drive over it in your driveway. And what you want is tiny little seed, and that's what each little bit is a seed crystal that healthy soil is going to radiate out from in your garden. So the more little seed crystals you have gives you more benefit than fewer huge seed crystals. You're working on the scale of microbes, not the scale of human visibility. You don't need to crush it to a powder like a dust, but you get my point. You can use bigger material. The thing with a T-Lud is that there's problems with material that's too small and problems with it's too large. If it's too small like sawdust, you can't get enough of a draft through the column, through the cylinder. That make sense? If you have chunks that are too big, let's say you have like cut off 2x4s that are like this, it's going to allow too much of a draft in one around it, where some other place it's not going to have as much of a draft, and then you get weird inconsistencies and just weird things start happening. If you expect to put big chunks in there and then there's the small stuff over here, once again you're going to get inconsistencies in the draft, and that's going to give you inconsistencies in the whole process. Any other questions before I move on?
Well, feeding it to livestock. Like the pigs eat the char and then they food, you know?
That's a great question. I've never really thought of it. I mean,
they love it. They love it.
They love it.
They love it.
Did everybody hear what he said? He suggested feeding it to livestock, like something like a pig. Chickens, they'll eat it, it'll pass through them, then it's in their manure, and then as you're spreading that animal manure into your compost or your gardens, that's a way to distribute it. I mean, sometimes if you call the poison control center, if you've eaten something poisonous, sometimes what they'll tell you to do is get some good charcoal and eat that, because the charcoal will go and absorb it. So, I mean, I can't imagine it would hurt the livestock if sometimes a doctor tells you to eat charcoal, so.
There's runoff, and you make a berm, and you put char in that to catch all the nutrients in the runoff.
Yeah, people make these like socks that are filled with compost or charcoal, and they're great. You'll see those like around development places in towns where they're trying to keep runoff from going onto the sidewalk or the street or something like that. And this charcoal can be used for other stuff besides biochar. I mean, most of y'all are here for biochar, but you could filter water with this charcoal. If you're a blacksmith, you could use it in your forge. You could use it medicinally to clean up toxicity in your gastrointestinal tract. Anybody have any other ideas? I think there's probably a few more ideas out there somewhere. All right. I want to go back to where we kind of started. We call this a top lit updraft. I don't know if any of y'all have attempted to light a fire on the top of a column of wood before. It can be a little bit of a trick. What I do is I cheat. I recommend you cheat as well. I get a spray bottle, put some denatured alcohol in it from the hardware store, and just spray a fine mist over the whole top. Saturate a few pieces, but you don't need a lot. But you're just trying to start the process. So you've got a lit cylinder. Immediately put the lid on, and then stick it underneath your cooking stand. This cooking stand's got a little chimney drop. Slide it over, drop the chimney down, make sure that the hole on the lid is centered in that chimney. And this is the number one mistake people make when they're trying to cook on these things. They already have their pot on here, or they immediately, after they just did what I just did, try to put their pot on here. Just be patient. You're going to see that flame coming out of there and you're like, oh, I want to use those BTUs and I want to be perfectly efficient. Just give it a couple minutes. Let the wood start turning into charcoal, create some red hot charcoal, get that draft really going, and then put your pot on there. Voila! You're now cooking for the next 25 minutes. After about 25 minutes, this 3 gallons is pretty much at a boil. This is a great size, a 3-gallon pot is a great size pot for cooking on these stoves. It's perfect. And like I said, see how the pot like is just perfectly over the whole cook stand top. So all the heat just going in that. And literally, I mean, you could be putting your hand right next to here and you're barely feeling the heat. The heat's just driving into the bottom of that pot. How do you know when this is done? It doesn't actually go out fully. What you'll notice the whole time it's cooking is you'll be seeing yellow flames flicker out every once in a while. They're mostly contained, but every once in a while you'll see a yellow flame. If you get down here and look, that's pretty eye level for y'all. Y'all can see that? If you look at that level, you'll see yellow flames the whole time, just flying into the bottom of the pot. Those yellow flames, I'll stand up so you can see me, is wood gas combusting. So when the yellow flames start dying back, the flames get shorter and the yellow will start disappearing. That means you're running out of wood and you've converted all that wood into charcoal. So at that point, when I see no more yellow flames around here, I'll get down, line of sight in, and I usually try to count, I don't know, if I can count 5 to 10 seconds without seeing a single yellow flame come up, I'm done. So what I then do with this champion, lift the chimney out of the way, pull it out. Now you got burning charcoal on here, that's why it's got a long handle on it, it's hot. Pour it out, pick up a spray bottle, make sure it's not the spray bottle from before, which is very important. This is a spray bottle full of water. Don't mix them up. Just spray a fine mist of water. That does 2 things. One, the water hits the charcoal and immediately bursts into steam, and the steam dries through and opens up the remaining pores of the charcoal. That's going to make a higher quality biochar. 2, it cools it down, and charcoal needs to be burning at a certain temperature to actually combust. The next thing you do is just put a lid on it so no oxygen can get in there and you're trying to quench it. If you just dump this out on the ground and you came back the next day, it's all going to be gone. It's going to be ash. You've got to quench it. You've got to put it out. And make biochar to fertilize your garden to grow better tomatoes the next year. You know what a retort is? A retort's a fancy word for those who don't know, which is basically a semi-sealed metal container that has wood in it, and you add heat from an outside source. You can actually run flue gases through the chamber, or you can add heat from the outside, and you're heating that wood until wood gas starts pyrolyzing off of the wood. Does the word pyrolysis, is everybody familiar with that word? For people who aren't, if you've ever heard the word electrolysis, people are more familiar with that word for some reason. It's like breaking something apart with electricity. Pyrolysis is breaking something apart with heat. Pyre, like a fire, funeral pyre. And so you're adding heat to the wood in the retort. That's actually literally, it's called destructive distillation. It's breaking the wood apart into wood gas. And then I said semi-sealed, that's very important. You have to have a port that opens, and like this gentleman is saying, that port could go to a compressor. A vacuum pump could pull it through a cooler and you could compress it. Wood gas does not compress as well as other things we are accustomed to compressing, like propane. Wood gas is primarily hydrogen and carbon monoxide. We're used to compressing gases like propane, which has got 3 carbons and 8 hydrogens. It's a much bigger molecule. So, but that could be done, but that's not what, particularly this situation. It is true that if you put this charcoal into your soil and you didn't nutrient load it and inoculate it with beneficial microorganisms, that you're actually going to have a very short-term negative impact on your plant growth. Because those microbes are going to move in and they're going to want nutrients and they're going to actually pull it out of your soil for the first year or 2. Now long-term, once they move in and they start getting happy and start reproducing, and your plant roots will find it, because believe me, your plant roots will find these little bits of biochar. And the plant roots will kind of grow around them. I'm curious if people are interested in the soil food. Would everybody know about the soil food web? I'm going to give a quick overview. I hope that's okay for everybody. This is a really important way to understand why biochar is working. How I like to look at the soil food web is the first thing that really took my attention is the plant scientists started figuring out that your average plant what we consider a plant, like grasses to trees to shrubs. Your average plant is taking half of all the sugar that it produces through photosynthesis and it's putting it below ground. On average, there's obviously variation. About half of that, so a quarter, half of a quarter of all the sugars that a plant produces through photosynthesis, it's going through a lot of trouble to make those sugars. It's leaching out the roots of the plant. And when scientists first started discovering this, they were like, how could that be? How could this thing have evolved to be so inefficient where it's leaking out that much sugar out the roots? And they finally figured out, oh, that sugar is feeding microbial populations of bacteria and fungi. Why is it doing that? Because these bacteria and fungi, they're the ones that can go up to a soil particle that has phosphorus in it, let's say. Everybody know about like phosphorus around here in western North Carolina. You take a soil from the land you own, send it to the NCDA testing lab, and they're going to tell you that your soil has no phosphorus in it. None. And yet you can have a tulip poplar tree growing on your land for about 60 years, grow to this size and 100-something feet tall, and you're telling me that your soil has no phosphorus? What they're saying is that your soil has no soluble phosphorus. So where's the tulip poplar tree getting phosphorus? It's getting it from soil microbes. Plant roots are horrible at they can pretty much only absorb soluble nutrients. But bacteria and fungi are incredible at going up to soil particles and etching the soil particles with organic acids and pulling nutrients out of soil particles into solution. Right? And so you're breeding millions upon billions of bacteria and fungi around your plant roots because the plant is feeding them with sugar. And then you have a soil food web. Like above ground, you have a food web where you have grass growing, and then you have the bison eating the grass, and then you have the wolves are eating the bison, and then there's things die, so then you have buzzards eating dead things. You have a food web of everything eating everything else. Same thing below ground with things that we can't even see. There's things that eat the bacteria and fungi, and then they poop out what? All those nutrients that the bacteria and fungi just scoured and etched off the soil particles, but they're now pooping out those nutrients in soluble form. Where? Right by a plant root. So what is biochar doing? Biochar is inoculating the soil with the beneficial microorganisms that are going to lead your garden soil to be healthy. So that when your plant roots are starting to leach out those sugars, you have an incredible diversity and habitat for all those beneficials. They're there, they're ready to do that work and to create that whole soil food web, which is going to give your plants the nutrients they need. With me? Thanks for letting me explain that. I'm going to go to the beer keg. You're all familiar with this, I imagine. This is nothing but a beer keg with holes cut in the bottom of it. In a radial fashion, so it's not just in one spot. You can see the holes are all over the bottom, so it's coming up everywhere throughout the whole column. This is something I welded together for my different gasifier that I'm hoping to make wood gas for an engine out of someday. I don't think this part is necessary, but I put this down in the bottom so my wood chip isn't covering those holes. And that air that's going to come in is distributed all over the place. Now, how is air getting into the bottom? See how these got very small holes in the bottom of the keg? This hole here, it's got 4 of them all around. That's letting in primary air to those holes that I cut in the bottom. All right? So it's just like that T-lug. I'm letting in a limited amount of primary air. It's coming up through a column of wood chip. Yeah? I'm going to take this thing out of here, or it's going to keep banging around while I do the next part. I took a plasma cutter and cut out the lid. This was the lid where, the pump where you're pumping the beer out of the keg. Just cut that out of your way. And you fill your wood chips up to that level. Not to the top of the keg, but to the level where the lid was. Because right above the level of the lid, what is there? Handle holes. Wow, look at that. The handle holes are a lot bigger than the bottom holes. They're about, and it's just a mistake of nature, natural human design, they're about the perfect proportion of secondary air to primary air. The keg's ready to go. So once again, I have this in the bottom. I've loaded wood chip up to where the old lid was, not up to the top. I've sprayed alcohol on it, denatured alcohol, light it. These are everywhere. It's just a lid to a 55-gallon barrel. Cut a hole in it. I was fortunate enough to find this stainless steel scrap, but any old black, rusty 8-inch chimney pipe will do, which are all over the place. Get yourself a short section, and you are rocking. This thing is going to blast heat out of the top of this for about 50 minutes. And what I haven't done yet, I just traded this like about a week ago, would be to weld on some stands on this lid that make a cooking platform where you could put a big old cook pot on top of here. You could put a hot water heater steel casing on top of here. You heat up a whole mess of hot water. You could put this under an alcohol still. You could have a big old shrimp boil, invite all your friends. Crawfish boil. Right? And then you're going to have a whole bunch more. Now notice something about this. This doesn't have the second cylinder. That smaller one had 2 cylinders. This one has just got 1. You don't need the second cylinder. The second cylinder does give you 2 advantages, and I want to review what those are. First advantage is that if you're touching your T-lug gasifier, that second cylinder is a lot cooler than that first cylinder, let me tell you. So this is a little bit more dangerous to be around. The second thing the second cylinder is doing is that in this unit, the secondary air is coming up all around the first cylinder and getting preheated. So by the time it hits your wood gas, it's already pretty dang hot, and that's just making the whole process a little bit more efficient. You could pretty easily just take a 55-gallon barrel, cut it to about this height, and set it up on some bricks so that plenty of air can get up under it to provide and get the same effect. Where 1, it's a little bit safer from touching, and 2, you're preheating your secondary air before it goes up through the handle into the combustion chamber, let's call it. I don't see why this couldn't heat a 40-gallon hot water heater up to hot water heater temperatures, which one isn't boiling, of course, but like, you had a question?
Could you just put a tall chimney on it and wrap a tube around it to keep hot water like a heat riser?
Certainly could. But you're going to get more heat by just blasting it right into the container of water. But that would certainly work as well. I mean, people have those kind of systems, like a thermosiphon system, around their chimney pipes or their wood stove a lot. I have friends who have those. I highly recommend, there's an hour-long free documentary online. It's called The Secrets of El Dorado. If you haven't watched it, do yourself a favor. This is one of the most important hour-long documentaries you could ever watch. It's about how the first European to explore the Amazon didn't go up the Amazon. They actually went, it was Oriana, was the name of the conquistador. He went over the Andes, they built a boat in the headwaters of the Amazon, and they floated all the way down. All right, that took a while. They get to the mouth of the Amazon, all they have is a riverboat. They can't get, it takes them a long time to get back to Europe. It takes Europeans a long time to get back to the Amazon. But what he told Europe when he got back, and he wrote in his journal, says, oh my gosh, there's this Amazonian river, probably wasn't called the Amazon at that time, along the banks of which is long expanses of fertile farmland. Populous cities almost unlike anything we have in Europe. Now it was 60 years before any European got back to the Amazon. When they got back to the Amazon, this is where the myth of El Dorado came from. They expected to see these broad expanses of fertile farmland. They expected to see these big populated cities, and what they find? They found this wild jungle with scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. And so for centuries, we thought that Oriana was lying. History relegated him as a liar for centuries. And just literally in the last decade or two, we figured out that he was actually spot on. And that probably what happened is that Oriana and his soldiers were spreading all kinds of European diseases, like the Europeans unintentionally or sometimes intentionally spread all over the New World. And within a few years, you had probably 90 to 95% mortality, and you had complete civilizational collapse. The farm fields were abandoned, and what Europeans took as this wild, crazy Amazonian jungle was just a few generation old regrowth off abandoned farm fields in a lot of places. And that where Oriana in his journal wrote, oh, excuse me, there's another important fact here, is that for all these centuries we thought he was a liar. Other scientists, anthropologists, soil scientists were confirming that he was a liar. They were saying, well, you know, the soil in the Amazon is actually some of the least fertile on the planet. He would have had to have been lying. You can't have populated cities on places that have infertile soil. You need fertile soil for populated cities. And for some reason, it took centuries for people to correlate his journals. And they found that where he was saying there were broad expanses of fertile farmland, the soil wasn't infertile like it is in most places of the Amazon natively. It was they called terra preta, which is Portuguese for dark earth. It wasn't clay, lateritic soils that could barely hold nutrients. It was dark earth that you could reach your arm into up to your shoulder, loamy, and could grow just about anything in. And so when they finally figured this out, the soil scientists were like scratching their heads, being like, well, how did that happen? I mean, from what we know about geology, or what we think about we know from geology, this lateritic bad soil right here has the same geological parentage as this super dark, deep, fertile soil, this terra preta. If they have the same geological parentage, why is one so poor and one so deep and fertile? So they started studying it, putting it under the microscope, and they discovered, oh, this was kind of human-modified soil. The indigenous people of the Amazon were making charcoal. We don't know exactly how they were making their charcoal. We don't know exactly what they were doing. He's got
Slash and char.
slash and char.
They would make big fires and then cover the dirt with smolder.
They also took all their trash and they burned it. Their food, their pots, their everything. They turned it all
into char. And then they buried that into their farm fields, deeply into their farm fields. And that charcoal that they buried centuries ago, we're just talking 500 years ago at the latest, is still there, still providing fertility to the degree that some of these places that have terra preta to this day, they actually mine some of that soil and they sell it to farmers and gardeners in Brazil. Now there's one thing, it's still fertile today, that's important, but I want to go to another little level here, is that carbon is still there. Let's just stop and think about that for a second. What we're saying is that if you make charcoal out of waste wood, what's happening here? Let's step back a second. If you put that mulch instead of into your T-Lud gasifier, if you put it out on your garden beds, you let it sit there, what's going to happen to it? It's all going to rot. It's going to decompose. Some of it's going to form humus, a very, very small percentage, but most of it is going to be decomposed by microorganisms who are going to put that carbon dioxide right back in the atmosphere. That tree that made the wood pulled that carbon dioxide originally out of the atmosphere, turned it into wood, and eventually when that wood rots, it goes back to the atmosphere, right? But what we're saying now is that you could be taking that wood and instead turning it into charcoal, putting it in your garden beds, and for hundreds of years, and some scientists think maybe millennia, it's a carbon sink. It won't go back in the atmosphere. It'll stay in the farm fields. So we could be taking waste wood from all over the world, wood that would normally be releasing carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere, and instead banking it into the farm fields of the planet, into our farm fields, fertilizing them in a way that could get them off of a lot of fossil fuel intensive fertilizers, fossil fuel intensive herbicides and pesticides. Some people claim that we could take all the carbon dioxide theoretically released since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution by fossil fuel combustion and suck it out of the atmosphere by taking this carbon waste, this wood waste, and charring it and fertilizing the farm fields of the world. This could be a game changer. This isn't the answer. This T-LUD's not going to get us to there, but it's a dang good first step. And I recommend everybody be playing with it as much as you can. I think I'm done if anybody doesn't have any extra questions.